Welcome to Tablenauts. My name is Max.
I'm Doolin.
And today we're going to be doing a review of Tamashii, Chronicle of Ascend. This is Awaken Realms Lite, newest game coming to GameFound probably right now as you're watching this video.
Yeah.
This is a cooperative and competitive scenario-driven game in which you're kind of going to be programming things. I'll show this off what little I can without using the forget the components. It's a compiler in which you're going to be dropping tokens in, basically moving them around and then activating or programming certain algorithms like so. In this game, you're going to be maneuvering around the map and flipping over map tiles. There's tokens on them, just like Nemesis, that are going to reveal certain special things that are hidden. There's different actions that you can take on those locations that are going to do separate things.
Not nearly as scary when you move between locations.
Not at all scary. You're not generating noise on every turn or anything and spawning a queen alien about to rip your throat out. But the movement system works very similar if you're familiar with that. And essentially, you're going to be going through a deck of cards. This is your objective. You must do this. This is your reason why. Once you complete this, move on to this.
Yeah.
And so you're going to be progressing through a narrative kind of story until you ultimately win. This is a 100% prototype. There is a prologue scenario, a cooperative scenario, and a competitive scenario. And we have played all three of those and wanted to go ahead and give you our thoughts on that.
So you did mention that there is no like sound because of Nemesis, but there is the trace, and that's actually how enemies are introduced into this game. And so at the end of your turn, depending on how many movements you took, you'll roll a certain number of dice.
That's accurate.
And the
that's
trace,
a fair point. I hadn't even made that mental connection.
Yeah, the trace track will move up on your specific person, and then once it gets up into the 1, 2, and then 1, 1, you'll draw cards for that number of enemies, and then those enemies at the end of each of your turns will get to attack you.
They attach to you specifically.
Yeah, and that was very interesting to me because I don't know if I've ever played a co-op game where, you know, Max has enemies, I have enemies.
We can't help each other.
We can't help each other. We can encourage each other and like watch each other and like root for each other, but like
you could do it, Doolin.
Yeah, but the tracing attaches robots to you that you have to deal with, which is interesting.
And this game kind of combines different various elements of other games. We mentioned the Nemesis kind of attachments. We mentioned the programming. You mentioned that it was a not real-time bullet. Yeah, and that's kind of understandable.
Like, you got rid of the one thing that I didn't really like about Bullet because it was so stressful. And like this time I actually got to think about it, and like on top of that, just like Bullet, you have extra cards that will be down below, which are called augmentations in this game that you can actually upgrade as you get experience and get more of and better ones. It's really neat.
And one of the cooler things you mentioned is the upgrading system. I mean, when we start the game, we start with a starting body. Essentially, they are all basically the same. We're all walkers. We have the same stats. We just have one little ability that may differ.
Yeah.
But then throughout the game, we can upgrade. They can attack better, and they have special abilities.
Yeah.
And on top of the actual body you can overtake, you've got the augmentations that you mentioned, which can be like an ion shotgun that just does mass amounts of damage. A portal gun like your character.
Yeah, that was so cool.
Yeah.
I think on top of that, this whole time
fulfills
I'm like,
that fantasy.
Take that, like throw that off. I want this thing. And like it's just really cool.
And you can literally swap them out turn by turn. Like when you get a new augmentation, you're not discarding your other one. Like if you want it the following turn, you're like, I'm just gonna swap back for this turn only. And then I'm gonna swap back again. So it really allows you to like customize and unlock. You won't necessarily just want to unlock one thing. Like in another game where you're like, I want a better weapon. I'm gonna get this better weapon. I'll never use the trash that came before it. That's one thing that this kind of avoids in the sense that everything has its uses and you can unlock 6 different things and just constantly be swapping them out for exactly what you need on that very turn.
Which we should say, this is a very Cyberpunk heavy game.
Yeah, 100%.
And so all of that leans really well into the
thematics.
Like I think that is obviously something that Awaken Realms always does pretty well. But like this game definitely made me feel like I was in that. Like if you're a fan of that type of theme, great game.
You're in. So we mentioned this is a co-op and competitive game. We're going to talk briefly about both of those things separately. So for starters, we'll talk about cooperative, which is how we played both the prologue and the actual cooperative scenario. I think that the cooperative I had a lot of fun with. It was a good time. I was very taken aback by the fact that we really can't assist each other that much.
Yeah, that was very strange.
The fully competitive scenario, not the prologue, fixed that to an extent, in the sense that we were fighting a single enemy, like we were fighting a boss. And so me and you were allowed to fight
together.
the boss rather than it just being one attached enemy to one another. But it still did feel weird. And I want to clarify, I enjoyed it. I very much had a good time with it. I like the gameplay loop of the constant upgrades and the programming and the bag building, the removing certain tokens, adding in ones, and especially if you focus on something with your augmentations. Like I can focus on red tokens and just constantly try and cycle out other tokens and cycle in red tokens, so I'm allowed to use my ion shotgun over and over again. But it just feels weird, and that we're like not allowed to cooperate so much.
So for the most part, definitely the cooperative experience was amazing. I thought that the way that the story works really, really well, that actually reminds me a lot of my experience with a game that does that extremely well, which is Stuffed Fables. Like there's just like, complete this and then come back and read this and you get more story, and then boom, like it throws you into something else. And like if you do X, or X, skip further in the story, like all of that kind of stuff.
I wanted to make sure we touched on that because there were decisions that we made. We were on card 3 and we made decisions, and it was like, if you do this, you're gonna go to card 4. If you do this, you're gonna go card 5. Then we went to card 5 and it was like, now go to card 8. So like we missed 4, 6, and 7. And I like that it really was impactful what decisions you made.
For sure. And I think that was the best part about the co-op for me.
Agreed.
But with all of that, what Max is saying about like the lack of player interaction kind of makes me lose a little bit of points on that, because like this feels like, and I'm pointing at the cards that we're reading together, we're building the story together, we're making these decisions together, and then we're just doing our own separate things. Like, and I wish that there was maybe some like, I don't know, some programming that I could do and be like, here's like an extra shield.
Like if they took that off Bullet too, where instead of giving you stuff to be bad, we can give you stuff to be helpful. I'm popping this off my board and giving it to you because I know you need extra reds so you could do more damage, like something like that.
It definitely made me feel like I had a part to play, I guess. And at the same time, like I cared about what Max was doing because I didn't want him to ruin the game for us, and he probably cared about what I was doing.
I think we were all excited for each other's success.
Exactly.
It just wasn't that we were able to really do anything about it, which isn't, I agree with you in that it works, I think, because you feel engaged so the entire time, like on everything that you're doing. You have to figure that out.
Absolutely.
But it is still just so different. I don't know. I don't think I've ever played a cooperative game that still retained the feeling of a cooperative game and the excitement and joy when your friends succeed, but like stripped away so much of your agency to actually cooperate and assist. It still feels like that, and that's why I think it still works, because it still gives me that co-op feeling, and I still had that joy the entire time, yet like nothing I could actually help you with.
If you're like listening to this and you're like, I don't want anything to do with a game that never has a way for us to interact, all of that was relieved by the end, which you mentioned with the boss, which was one of my favorite moments.
Agreed.
Like we read all this cool stuff that the boss was gonna do, and we were like, how are we going to defeat this thing? But both of us had these really heavy attacks.
Yeah, we had
that
gotten
were just
powerful.
So awesome. Like, and that, like, again, the upgrade system's fantastic and so fun. We got to that point and we did it together. Like, we combined our attacks, and then by the end, you saw his ginormous health track go down all the way, and we got to do that together. I don't know. We complain about or mention the fact that there's no player interaction, but maybe in a lot of these scenarios, you'll have a boss at the end that you all finally come together and cooperate and defeat. But either way, I still think that the cooperative experience was fantastic. Agreed. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of the story.
100%.
I think that, I don't know, even just the way it was written was engaging, and like I was ready to find out what was next.
So that's our feelings on the cooperative. I'm sure we'll touch more on it at the end of the video when we do some likes and dislikes. But moving on to the competitive part of the game, I felt personally like it was much more lackluster, and I want to say that I still think it was good, but like I did not feel engaged nearly as engaged because there's still so little player interaction. The way that this scenario, and I want to make sure we focus on that a lot, we only have experience with the 2 scenarios in the prologue that are included in the prototype. We have not a clue what's going to actually be in the full game. I think it's at least double-digit scenarios, like 10 at least. We don't have a clue how they're going to work. But this scenario that we played competitively was essentially a race through the objective cards, essentially. And so me and Doolin both started on objective card 1, and I finished objective card 1 first. So I flip over objective card 2, and I move to objective card 2. He sees it, but can't touch on it until he finishes objective card 1. And then at the end of the game, I finished the game. As you were just doing your turn, I flipped it over, and it was like victory. I was like, oh, it's over. I won.
Yeah, that was a little abrupt.
Sorry. Yeah. And it's just like, because there's no real player interaction, and because it's strictly a race, it just felt so disconnected. I still enjoyed the gameplay, like the constant upgrading. When I thought a couple of the objectives were really cool, like we had to do these really obscure patterns, and we had to get bugs, which are normally a bad thing, and then do that to move on. I liked that it forced us into things that are like obscure and different, and not just like deal damage to enemies, kill 5 enemies. Like, it wasn't so simple like that. I enjoyed that a lot, but it just still felt so stripped of me and you being like actually competing.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like we were playing a solo game, and then I finished first. And maybe that's what they were going for, but I at least hope there's different scenarios. I don't hate that.
Absolutely.
It was fine, it was fun, but I just don't want that to be everything that the competitive scenario is.
Absolutely.
Like, if that were all that the competitive brought to the game, I would not be pleased with that. But I think that there will be more scenarios that will allow me to have fun with that and then move on to something more engaging.
Yeah. I think that for me, there were some things that like the competitive thing added.
Oh, that's true.
Which was the upgrade matrix. So every time you completed one of these, you had to place a little cube on this board and get that ability, which is really cool.
That was very cool.
I thought that was neat. And then on top of that, it definitely, I'm not going to say that the cooperative was easy for us at all, but I definitely felt a heightened sense of awareness of what was going on, and like really, really trying to be very careful with what I did because I wanted to beat you. Like, I wanted to race. For me, however, I'm with you. I definitely think that because these objective cards that we're fulfilling don't really have much of a story.
I was hoping you would touch on that.
Losing that aspect is hurtful for me.
Yeah.
As a person who loves theme, who loves like story and like just more and more, just give me all of that.
It didn't feel like there was a reason to do what we were doing other than the fact that we were competing.
Yeah.
It was like, here's what you need to do, but it did not have that flavor text or that story behind it like the cooperative scenario did.
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, it kind of reminds me of like games like Destiny or like anything like that if you're a video game player, where, you know, there's the campaign that you can go play with your friends, and then if you want to take a break and play against each other, you can, like, and there's no consequence for that.
Okay.
So like, I think that instead of looking at it for me as a, oh man, I wish that they would have done it better, it's, oh, there's just more to offer from this game, which is neat that they wrote all of that.
And one thing I did very much enjoy is that because this game centers so much around upgrades, the fact that it was a race really allowed that to be a complex situation. I really want a new body. I really want these augmentations.
Yeah.
But those are turns that I'm spending getting those bodies and getting those augmentations that I'm not spending fulfilling the objective. And because it's a race, we really want to do that first. I mean, it's a catch-22. Do I spend time and get a new body, or do I push through and try and complete the objective? That body may very well help me later on because it's going to up my health, it's going to up my damage, it's going to up my ability to program, but it could take me 2 extra turns that I could have been spending doing something else. And so I really like that it forced you into that decision that is not an obvious one. Ultimately, I think we both enjoyed both modes.
For sure.
I just preferred the cooperative mostly for the theme and like the reasoning behind it.
Yeah.
I just didn't feel like I was engaged as much with the competitive scenario. As far as production and rules, which we do need to briefly talk on, it's full prototype. It's gonna be a beautiful production because it's Awaken Realms. They are known for that. And the rules will probably not be 100% amazing because it's Awaken Realms. They are known for that.
Get yourself a friend, because halfway through I was like, Max, I can't read this anymore. Can you please?
It's not terrible. It's just a little confusing, and it's not cleaned up. Now, hopefully, by the time this game fulfills, 95% of my qualms with this game will be resolved. I hope the rulebook is improved.
I always hope.
I hope there's more scenarios. I hope they tidy up some of the scenarios. Like, I think that those are things that will happen. But all we can do after playing the prototype is review the prototype.
Yeah.
So we want to put caveats in that we hope and think these things will improve, and we encourage you to check out the campaign page to see what more details they've offered and stuff, the insight they've shown of what's coming. But all we can review is what we have. Final opinions. We want to talk about some things we like first, other than what we've already addressed, because we've already talked about some things. We both like the cooperative, we both like story, we both like the upgrade system, we both like the mechanics they stole from Nemesis. Well, stole, I mean, it's their own game.
It's their own
but like, there's a lot of things that we've already talked about and liked. Is there anything that you haven't mentioned that you want to discuss?
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that I absolutely love is this player board, and I don't know how similar it's going to be, but like anything that has inlays is always going to be really nice. The system of getting shields, firewalls, and recharges through your programming is just really awesome. They're very useful. Not once have I gotten them and been like, well, I guess I'll get a fourth one that I'll never use. Like, I'm constantly using
I was worried Firewall wasn't useful. And then we played the competitive scenario. I was like, oh my God, there's so many bugs. I was like, I need all the Firewall. Give me all of it.
And then on top of that, like, it just felt like every upgrade was nice. Getting the ×2 tokens, fantastic. Getting the viruses, always good. Until it's not, until you get bugs. Every time I got anything, I was excited. Like, and I got to throw it into my dump, which will go back into my bag, and then just the joy of opening up things out of your bag. Like, what am I gonna get? How am I gonna build things this turn? I thought all of that was great, and there's not very many programming games that I've gotten to do that are like this, and so it was a unique experience that I enjoyed for sure.
Yeah, so one of the things we haven't touched on yet is specific to the enemies, in that not only do they all have their unique, level, their health, their attack, their criticals, stuff that happens when a crit gets rolled, but also they have abilities that allow you to do stuff to them.
Yeah.
So they have special, hack, and escape, and they normally take smaller algorithms. And so I just really like how each card is different and allows you to use stuff that's on your compiler that you, before that combat, may have not realized would have been handy.
Yeah.
And then once you have that enemy attached to you, it really... the complexity ramps up as the game goes on.
For sure.
Because you look at your compiler at the beginning of the game and you say, okay, basic algorithms. I'm going to start getting shield. I'm going to start getting viruses. I'm going to start getting recharge tokens. I'm going to start getting firewall. As the game goes on, you're like, okay, location events. Now I need to start considering these. The red and the yellow there to get my body. The yellow and the blue here to reset my trace track. And then you start getting enemies attached to you. And then you've got 3 different other things you can activate per enemy. You may have 3 enemies on you. That's another 9 things, plus the location, plus the basic, plus your augmentations, plus your body if there's anything there. Like, I really like not only the ramping of power, but the ramping of things you can do. So it starts off very basic. I'm doing basic algorithms, and then by the end of the game, I need to take this location ability and do this 2 specials on this enemy. And so like, you're almost just forgetting about that and moving on to something even better. I really like that and how that makes me feel, essentially. Like, through the start of the game, I'm weak and I'm doing weak things, and then at the end of the game, I'm strong and I'm doing strong things. So I really did enjoy that ramping ability. Now, moving on to the things we didn't like. We've already touched on the rule book. We've already touched on the lack of player interaction, the lack of story, and certain areas in the competitive mode. Is there anything beyond that you can think of?
Not really. I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it was fun. I loved the story. I loved all of that. I'm just trying to decide if the lack of player interaction that I'm used to is a good thing for me. It's unique.
And the good thing with the lack of interaction is we were still excited about other stuff. We were still happy. You were still like, Max, check this out.
Yeah.
Like, I'm doing 8 different things with my compiler, and I'm activating 2 basics, a location, and 3 things on enemies, and I kill them all, and I get XP, and I'm allowed to buy this. So like, even if there's not the direct involvement, or like, even if I don't necessarily care what Doolin's doing that much, I still care on a personal level.
For sure.
I may not care on a game level, but it's still exciting to watch him do all the things he can do.
And then we also get to make decisions in this. So again,
in the cooperative,
I guess where I have the biggest issue is
what
the
it
competitive
boils down
mode.
to. Same.
They just didn't feel. Even though we were competing and racing, it didn't feel that competitive. And you won, and I was just behind you. But at the same time, I didn't know that you were close.
Right.
And to be fair, you didn't know you were about to flip over the card that said victory.
Right, I didn't know the last card, yeah.
It was just one of those things where we would read what happens next together, and then we both looked at our board, and we would do our own things. And I would watch maybe Max move around the board, but he did his own thing over there. I did my thing over here, and that was that. Yeah. So, again,
I think I'm right there with you. I enjoyed this prototype experience immensely. I thought it was a lot of fun. I recommend this game to you if you've listened to what we've had to say and you think that it sounds something up your alley. And I've been more negative on this than I typically am. And I still very much liked it.
Oh, for sure.
There's just some qualms, especially like you said with the competitive, that like I feel like it could be better. And I think that's my biggest complaint is give me more. Like show me what you can really do. I'm hopeful that the prototype competitive scenario was just was a prototype competitive scenario.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that come fulfillment and the production copy that there's more and better. And I think that they can do that. I think that it will be the case. But for now, I really, really enjoyed the cooperative scenarios.
Yeah.
And I liked the competitive scenarios.
It was like a really, really good main dish at a restaurant you love for cooperative, and then an okay dessert.
It's like you came back a second time. You're like, I'm gonna try something different because I've been here before.
That's way better.
I love my fried rice, but like, let me get something more unique. And you have it, and you're like, that's good.
I think
but I want my fried rice back.
my fried rice back.
Yeah, it's essentially that.
Cooperative mode is fried rice.
Yeah, competitive mode is like, I don't know. I was trying to think of a dish at Thai Smile. I love everything at Thai Smile. So, like, I can't. Sorry, that just doesn't work. Cooperative mode is fajitas. Competitive mode is a burrito.
You don't like burritos?
Not as much as I like fajitas. Yeah, one of the things that we haven't yet mentioned are specific to the enemies, which we'll toss some B-roll on screen here real quick, but I don't need to say that we'll toss B-roll on screen. Just effing do it,
okay.
Max. What am I doing?
Just effing do it, Max.